I'm going to turn it over to Carol Knobbe, who administers homeschooling regulations locally for Lane ESD, so we can get your perspective.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here, and Amy, you could ignore that panicked phone call I made when I thought I was late on the way here. I can tell you that one of the things that, Lane ESD is one of the number of ESDs that's across the state and has the responsibility for registration. We also have responsibility for truancy services in our county, and so there's an intersect between the mandatory attendance requirements, which includes the 10-day drop, and the homeschool. So oftentimes we find ourselves looking at those two things together to help us understand a particular situation. Or we might get a truancy referral and find that we have a student who hasn't notified their parent but has notified us of that they're registered for homeschooling. So there are some things like that. So mandatory attendance is between age 7 and 17. If a parent comes in and wants to homeschool at age 5 because it's kindergarten age, we don't register them because we have no requirement or need to register folks and welcome them back at age 7. So those are some kinds of just specific things. It's quite interesting in the sense, you talked about we do have some requirements in Oregon, but the fact of the matter is they're fairly minimal, and we do not have the ability to really do anything to recommend or to to guide parents. We have some basic information available on our website, but the law doesn't allow us, even if you had asked somebody in our office for curriculum recommendations, we're not allowed to do that. That's really, once you sign up as a homeschool parent, you are the teacher, and it is your curriculum decision that is being honored in this process. And so we're not allowed as a state agency to get involved in that. So it's kind of an interesting catch-22, because we do have some parents who sometimes sign up their children to homeschool, and then they want help, and we really can't give them any recommendations. We do make some recommendations about where they can go for resources, so they can go to homeschool associations, those kinds of things, but we don't give any specific recommendations about curriculum or other kinds of materials. We happen to have at Lane ESD a curriculum library, and sometimes people take advantage of just perusing through that library for materials, although I don't think most folks use those specific curriculum necessarily. So that's one piece that happens sometimes. I would say that our experience is similar to the national experience. We do see a rise in homeschool registration. I don't know that it's dramatic, but it's definitely increased over time, and you can see the trends. Lots of different reasons that we have anecdotal information on, but again, that's a place where we're not allowed to ask the reason for homeschooling. If somebody comes in to homeschool and it's explicitly to avoid truancy, and the parent says that and indicates that they really have no intent to homeschool but is avoiding the truancy outcome, we will not register them for homeschooling, because they basically said they want to register but they're not going to do the homeschooling, so we don't register them in that case. So that's one of the probably few parameters, but that would require a parent to make that kind of statement. Otherwise, if their child is truant and they want to pursue homeschooling because they think that's a better way to engage their child in schooling, that's really up to them. But if they say to us, I'm just doing this to get the truancy officer off my back, and I don't really, give a rip about what my son or daughter is doing, then we don't follow that process. We don't do that. So that's one parameter that we set. The testing requirement is the 15th percentile at ages, or not ages, grades 3, 5, 8, and 10. So those are fairly low from a number of people's perspectives. I would also say that students generally test a lot higher than that. I think statistically, and I don't know all the statistics in terms of what happens in Lane or even in Oregon, but we don't have any mechanism for having a statistical analysis of that kind of thing for Lane County. We just, because the method we maintain data it's not a student information system like you would have in a school. We simply document that they are maintaining the requirements that they need to maintain. So it's not a student record in a traditional method in terms of tracking progress over time, because again, we're just registering students and monitoring that they've met the minimum requirements, which is that they're testing within those grades and meeting that 15th percentile, and it's the parents' responsibility to monitor the progress and be accountable for that. And so that part is, we don't have any data, but I would say that there are other associations that maintain information about students' progress overall, and I think that there is some good data that says homeschool students do very well and are very capable and well-educated group of individuals as a whole. Maybe there are individual kids that have difficulties. The other thing that I think is important to understand about homeschooling is that there are some opportunities for students to be dual enrolled. So a student might be generally homeschooled, but take advantage of certain kinds of classes that happen at school. So there are arrangements that individuals can take advantage of with their school district, and that's really a negotiated agreement with the school district, and certainly subject to some availability in some cases. Not every school may have the course that you might be interested in as a parent, but those opportunities exist. Interestingly enough, one of the things that comes to my attention periodically, and it seems kind of silly, but sometimes sports seems to rule the world in schools and people's interests. So one of the things that happens is that there are some requirements that happen within sports associations, and their rules are a little bit different than homeschool regulations, and so there's a testing requirement there that there be a certain level of academic performance that is actually higher than the requirement that we have, and to participate at sports at a certain level requires annual testing, even though that's not our requirement. So there are some other requirements that get imposed on kids who are homeschoolers if they want to do sports within the K-12 system that we have no control over. They're set by the State Sports Association, and those are just, and that's the information that we provide on our website and that kind of thing. But the regulations are fairly minimal. Periodically there's buzz about changing the regulations. That doesn't tend to go anywhere. The state sets the requirement for what tests are accepted by us as state agencies, and so we don't make that determination. That's determined by the state, and they advise us. We periodically have some issues because tests change and the state may not keep up on that, and so we have to do some interpretation and crosswalk. But it's really a checks and balances that is fairly minimal, and at the same time I think tries to balance, you know, as you talked about, the interests of parents and the interests of the state. And certainly there are circumstances where things fall through the cracks, so to speak, but they are probably more exceptions to the rule, I would say.